The Dark Souls franchise is host of many a good theories when discussing the lore, and this trend continues with the third installment. Today we're going to count down what in my eyes, in no particular order, are the top 5 best fan theories for Dark Souls 3. I've tried to find ones that are backed with actual substantial evidence and have a good claim to actually being true, and avoided ones that rely too much on grasping at straws. These theories I found are directly taken from sites like Souls Lore and the Dark Souls 3 subreddit, which is a good source for Dark Souls lore in general if you ever feel like you want to read more of these. Anyway, on to my top 5 picks for the best fan theories. Number 5. Firstborn of Gwyn and Faram. After being stripped of his deific status, the Firstborn took on a new name, Faram, and befriended a Stormdrake. If the Nameless King was a friend of dragons, why was he depicted fighting one of them on the Faran helm? It would make sense that the dragons wouldn't trust him at first. Maybe King of the Storm challenged him to a duel, which Nameless King won and didn't kill him as a show of his lack of hostility. As a Knight of Ferosa, that would be something to be immortalised on a helmet. In Ferosa he was worshipped as a god of war, possibly a god king, and continued to fight alongside his men. As Ferosa became ravaged by the curse, the Lion Knights became mercenaries. According to the Dark Souls 2 Collector's Edition guide, the Lion Clan appeared suddenly, suggesting their origin isn't natural. It's possible that the Drown Lake butted heads with them, and perhaps would have hired mercenaries to deal with them. Filled with fear and awe at the sight of Faram and his Stormdrake, they eventually began worshipping him in their own way. A way that humans have trouble understanding, which is why no one ever identified their god as Faram. Perhaps the Lion Kings of Ferosa even built the sunlight altar that is found outside Earthen Peak, but there is no evidence to support this. It might seem like a little bit of a stretch to connect the Firstborn to so many groups, but take a look at the description of the spell you get from the Nameless King's soul. Once a slayer of dragons, the former king and war god tamed a Stormdrake, on which he led a lifetime of battle. This miracle is likely a tale of their bond. It's an interesting coincidence that the Ferosa Knights were called Lion Knights, and they and the Lion Clan both have a connection to some kind of god of war, but there is really no evidence to support that. Number 4. Yhorm's ancestor is Wolnir, and the profaned capital is Karthus. Yhorm's soul states, Yhorm is a descendant of an ancient conqueror, but was asked by the very people once subjugated to lead them. Though some may believe that this refers to the Giant Lord from Dark Souls 2, it is apparent that the lore of 2 has little to no consequence in 3, outside of some references in item descriptions. It seems much more likely, therefore, that Yhorm's ancestor is someone else. Though the inhabitants of the catacombs seem to be human skeletons, Wolnir is massive. This could be the influence of the abyss deforming him, but it may also be that he was a giant in life. This would help explain how he was able to easily crush the other lords of Karthus and become its conqueror. Additionally, if we assume that the profane capital is part of Karthus, it makes perfect sense that the people were once subjugated would be the descendants of the humans that were conquered by Wolnir, as it was the people of the capital that asked Yhorm for his leadership. If Yhorm was the descendant of a ruthless tyrant like Wolnir, it would also explain why he is described as Lonely Yhorm in his Cinders of a Lord item. The people of the capital likely shunned him due to his race and bloodline. It's probably during this time Sigurd of Catarina befriended the Lonely Giant. There are other connections between the catacombs and the capital. Both are underground and close to each other geographically, and both are consistently linked by mentionings of pyromancy. The Grave Warden Pyromancy Tome and the Karthus Pyromancy Tome both show that pyromancy had a strong tradition in Karthus, and each dark pyromancy references Wolnir specifically. The profane capital similarly is marked by the devastation of the profane flame, which also exists in-game as a pyromancy. Lastly, every area in Lothric is linked to a Lord of Cinder in some way, but there is no lord associated with the catacombs. This would be explained, however, if the catacombs and the capital were linked, as they would both be the lands of Yhorm. Number 3. Yashka, formerly Ocelot, is the youngest child of Guinevere, Queen of Lothric. A theory exists about Dark Souls 1 that crossbreed Priscilla was the child of Seath the Scaleless and Guinevere. Consumed King Aceros experimented on creating dragons from humanity, and it is said that after giving birth to Ocelot, her youngest, she quietly disappeared. King Aceros was obsessed with creating a worthy heir, and when this proved impossible, resorted to unspeakable means. Him having turned into a dragon-like creature is likely a result of his experimentation with dragons and humanity. Yashka's chime reads, "Her brother, the former knight captain, presented her with this medium together with another gift, her name." Brother here may not necessarily mean blood relation, as both Gwyndolin and Yashka refer to Gwyn as father, and to Guinevere as sister, and it is safe to assume that the Dark Moonblades refer to each other as brothers and sisters in arms. The fact that she was given a name along with the gift suggests that she had to conceal her identity and make a new one. Another interesting thing to look at is Aceros' dialogue. He clearly states that Ocelot is a child of dragons, and from the way he talks about him, it implies that Ocelot also possessed the ability to turn invisible, just like Priscilla. Priscilla and Yashka seem to have a lot of similarities. Scales on their face, a tail, being able to turn invisible. On top of this, Yashka and Aceros seem to have tentacles in common. While Yashka's arms seem to be similarly long and weak like Prince Lothric's, who is presumed to be the son of Aceros. Aceros refers to Ocelot as male, but it is possible that when Guinevere left, she took Ocelot along and trusted Gwyndolin with bringing him up. Having to conceal his identity, it can be speculated that Gwyndolin raised Yashka in the same way he was raised, and to be the next leader of the Dark Moonblades. It is worth mentioning that Aceros was infatuated with the search of moonlight, and although it was a stretch, one can contemplate the possibility of Ocelot having an affinity to the moon, thus raised as female, or just simply disguised as a female. Number 2. Guinevere, Queen of Lothric. As known from several item descriptions from Dark Souls 1, Guinevere, Princess of Sunlight, left Anor Londo after her father Gwyn sacrificed himself to lengthen the Age of Fire. Both Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3's Divine Blessing states that it has been blessed by the goddess of bounty and fertility, who is known to be Guinevere in Dark Souls 1. It is worth mentioning that in the distant manor in Ithril, there is a room with Silver Knights, protectors of Guinevere, with a portrait of Guinevere, and several others. A Silver Knight stands there looking at the portrait of the goddess, and upon killing him, he drops a Divine Blessing. It can also be speculated that the Dancer of the Boreal Valley is related to Guinevere. The dancer's soul reads, "The Pontiff Sullivan bestowed a double slashing sword upon a distant daughter of the formal royal family, ordering her to serve first as a dancer, and then as an outrider knight, the equivalent to exile." Interestingly, the dancer's soul can be transposed into the Soothing Sunlight miracle, granted to the maidens of the Princess of Sunlight. The dancer is said to be a direct descendant of the old royal family, presumably the royal family of Anor Londo, meaning Gwyn's children. The same way as the dancer, Rosaria, Mother of Rebirth, also seems to be connected to Guinevere. When doing Leonhard's quest, he becomes too obsessed with Rosaria. He kills her and steals her soul. When returning to Rosaria's bedchamber after this, you find a black eye orb, which you can use to invade Leonhard's world. To invade him, you must use this orb in Guinevere's old chamber. Upon killing Leonhard, you receive Rosaria's soul, which can be used to bring her back to life, or more importantly, to transpose it into the bountiful sunlight miracle. Number 1. The Untended Graves is in the future. Because Prince Lothric refused to link the flame, the future of the world is darkness. Just because you found Undex Gundyr impaled with a sword and full of rampant humanity, it does not mean you were the one that killed him. Any other undead may have arisen from the graves and tread this ground before, or even visited from another world as a phantom. The description of his helm says he was bested by an unknown warrior. He then became a sheath to a coiled sword in the hopes that someday the first flame would be linked once more. The Ashen One is far from unknown. All NPCs seem to recognize you immediately. Gundyr himself is probably cursed as an undead like you, so when you slay him, you remove the humanity that corrupted him, thus freeing him to become the champion he was meant to be. His halberd is said to never crumble, seeming to suggest that Gundyr was fated to an eternal service from the beginning, which supports the idea of his perpetual resurrection as an undead, like you. Yundex doesn't drop a soul, implying that he wasn't truly dead, and Champion does drop his soul later on. The soul's description reads, "A champion came late to the festivities and was greeted by a shrine without fire." So some time has passed after he was freed of the pus of man, in which the flame was extinguished. In this dark version of Firelink Shrine, the coiled sword fragment is found where the bonfire would be. The fragment's description says that it served its purpose long ago. So since you took the coiled sword that Undex Gundyr was impaled with and placed it into the Firelink, this is likely a fragment of that very sword in the future. You also find the eyes of the Firekeeper here, which reveals to the sightless Firekeepers things that they should never see, specifically a world without fire. According to the Firekeeper at the Light Firelink Shrine, she also hints at thy grand betrayal, implying that you will be the one to usher in the Age of Darkness. Ludleth elaborates further, saying that the eyes show a world destitute of fire, a barren plain of endless darkness. Then he questions if your intent is to be the betrayer the Firekeeper foresees. Finally, Ludleth explains that giving the eyes to the Firekeeper will reveal to her visions of the Age's end. This age is an age of fire, where the flame is lit, so, since you speak to him in the Light Firelink, the Untended Graves version must be in the future. In the end, it is possible that the Untended Graves are just a vision of a potential future, where the flame is not linked. I hope you enjoyed these theories. I found them just really fascinating, and of course there's other theories out there for many other different things, but these are the ones I personally enjoyed the most. But by all means, if you have your own theories, feel free to post them down below. Take care everyone, be good to one another, and have a great day.